Hi, and welcome to SCW, the wrestling channel here on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. Please subscribe right now. Leave any comments in the comment section. Please like and share the video as well. Back once again answering your questions in the wrestling community. If you want to be involved, all we've got to do is leave a question and the hashtag AskSCW. I know to get you involved for the next Q&A here on SCW on YouTube. I want to say a quick thank you to Sonia Deville. She's given me a nice little haircut. Mandy, see, this is what you could have had. Not so bad after all. Hopefully the barbershop is on its way back to SmackDown on Friday nights. But all kidding aside, looking forward to the hair versus hair match. It's probably rumoured and speculated with Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose at SummerSlam. Certainly a fun feud. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about your questions here in the Q&A. And we've got lots about AEW, WWE, and as well Impact Wrestling. So without further ado, let's dive straight in with our first question. And that question comes from Mr. DWE, Dan the Man Williams. Do you think people like Ryder and Brody Lee are new talents? They should have waited for crowds because the pop Ryder would have been huge. Well, I do agree with you. I mean, I think it's a crying shame with the pandemic that we've not had to have these big crowd pop moments. And when we talk about AEW, we talk about moments in WWE as well. I mean, Drew McIntyre, that WWE title win at WrestleMania would have been so amazing to have watched live with 80,000 fans. Keith Lee winning the NXT Championship as well, a big moment. You look at those debuts in AEW and you sit and think to yourself, like, yeah, what could have been? I mean, the likes of Matt Hardy, we've had Brody Lee, so many that we could have seen with these magic moments. And even just matches in general, I think would have had such a great feeling with the fans and the buzz. But I do feel, though, with AEW, they have continued their product. They've not let things halt them. They've continued to give us the best product possible. And if they have a star that they want or need to bring in, they're not holding back. They're going to bring that person into the company and show you what they are all about and what they see as the vision for them within All Elite Wrestling. You look at Ryder, yes, I think it would have been huge with fans. I think it would have had such a great pop. I did feel that the segment was perhaps a bit flatter than maybe what it could have been, given the circumstances. But at the same time, I'm much preferable to seeing things continue to be done on my TV screen rather than storylines being held back or not being done at all or pulled altogether because there's no fans in attendance. Not suggesting that WWE are necessarily doing that, but I do feel that they are the company that feels to me when watching them that they are the most that are holding back during this period, that don't want to give as good of content as they could have done. Let's look at the Hacker, for example, just completely dropped. Would we have got an answer had we had a crowd? Would it have been something memorable, or did they think it's just something that would not have connected and maybe Ali just wasn't a big enough name for the role? We have to wait and see as time will go on. Maybe it will resurface when fans come back. Maybe certain storylines will come on when fans come back. But it feels like in the rumor mill that with WWE, that has been something that's been suggested, that they've held things back because of what's going on. AEW have continued, and you can see through ratings that AEW are continuing to get the success of the ratings that they were getting before the pandemic started. They had a little dip like everyone did at the starting points, but now they seem to be back as they were doing before, and it looks like the numbers are slowly rising as well. They seem to be starting to get, the last couple of weeks, more dominance again over NXT on the Wednesday night ratings. So we have to wait and see what and how it's all going to play out, but I wish it was all in front of a crowd, but I am pleased as well that AEW are giving us the best content that they can possible. Next question comes from Jamie, the controversial one, Holmes. AEW have used a lot of enhancement talent on their show as of late. If you had to guess, who do you think is the most likely to get signed? Great question there for us, and we've had quite a few, haven't we? It's been really nice to see, though, that Eddie Kingston has been signed this week. For me, I was very happy to see that announcement come up that he is All Elite. He knocked it out of the park, and he deserved his contract. But you are right, there are more names in the frame. I mean, I have to say, Flying Brian Jr. has been on AEW Dark. We've also had the likes of, on the main Dynamite, we had Diamante in the women's division, Eva Lise. And we've even had Warhorse go for the TNT Championship this week as well. So there's been some new faces, and it would be interesting to see who would get signed. If it was me, I would love to see Flying Brian signed. I think that he has got something he could offer to the table. Maybe to wait for his spot, but I do think it's there for him. And as well as that, I would love to see Eva Lee signed as well, and Diamante. I think that the women's division does need some depth in the roster. As for Warhorse, it seemed to connect with a lot of people. I have to be honest, it didn't connect as much for me. Something was missing on that appearance. As much as I thought the entrance was quite cool, but at the same time, the match itself fell a bit flat. And we didn't get a promo of any sorts. I would like to see more before it seems to get signed. Would I like to see him appear in an AEW ring again? Yes, but maybe Dark would be a good way for 1 or 2 performances, and then we can take it from there. But from those, I think Flying Brian, Evilise, Diamante, I would like to see them all get signed. If I had to really put my money on it, though, Flying Brian and Diamante would be the favourites. But I'm a big fan of Evilise, love the work in Lucha Underground, would love to see her full-time in AEW. Next question comes from the Elite Jobbers. How long do you think Moxley will keep the AEW title? Well, he's been a great champion. He's had it since February now, I do believe. It was the Revolution pay-per-view. He defeated Chris Jericho. He's gone through multiple challenges at this point. And I do like now that we've gone through sort of the ex-WWE guys, but now we really are starting to get more of the... we had the newcomer in Brian Cage, of course, from Impact Wrestling and Lucha Underground he's been before. And now we're starting to see the homegrowns get their opportunity. We've got Darby Allin this week coming up, and MJF, that storyline has finally had its first seed planted. I hope that MJF is the guy to do it. Is All Out too soon, though, is my question for it. I do wonder. But I do think MJF is the right guy. He's not lost yet on a singles match. He's lost in tag team matches, but he's not lost in a singles environment. So if I had to put my money on it right now, I do think All Out would be an interesting place for it to happen. But a part of me feels that we maybe could see Moxley keep it until the last pay-per-view of the year, which, if it was the same name as last year, that would mean Full Gear. So I'm going to say at the moment, I think that Moxley has got a bit more time of run as champion. I think that with Moxley, he establishes the brand. He's a well-known face and name, despite the fact that it's a name change from his WWE days. I think the time is coming soon where we need to pass the torch to one of these young up-and-comers in the AEW roster. It goes back to an earlier question. Do we want to see MJF win that championship in front of no fans, or do we want to see it happen in front of fans where he's at his saltiest and fans will just hate it and it will just be a magical moment? So in my head, a bit me says that I think MJF is the right guy. Timing could be the slight issue. So let's see what we are for November. So that will be my predicted answer. And I would like MJF to be that guy. I think he is the right one to do it. Next question that comes from Tire World Order. What does AEW do with Eddie Kingston? Let's go, Mad King. I agree with you. It's great to see him there, and as we said earlier on in the video, he knocked it out of the park. It's great to see he finally is getting this opportunity on a big stage and to see what he brings to the table. I want to see this Eddie Kingston that we saw these last couple of weeks with that passionate promo, desperate, willing to do anything to get the win. And I think that that is a great way and a great start to it. We've had conversations on Twitter about this, of what would be great, and suggesting as well, even on this particular video series. And I said last week an idea about how Eddie Kingston could be amongst the Dark Order. Now, I thought that this would have been a good idea at one point, but I have since changed my mind, because I think that if Eddie Kingston had not been, as announced, signed with All Elite, you could have seen a desperate character that would do anything to get into AEW and get that opportunity. Now he's just been signed by Tony Khan. It feels like that would be unnecessary for him to just join the Dark Order. He's got a lot to offer in the company. He's got a unique character, a unique look. His persona could literally dominate on the mic. He could be one of the strongest promos they have. So for me, I want to see him as a heel. I want to see him desperate to see what it takes to win. I want to see him with the gimmick that he came in with, and I want to see where it takes him. As for early rivalries, something like this, it's hard to say, but maybe someone that's a household name to establish Eddie Kingston would be good. Maybe Matt Hardy, after his feud with Sammy Guevara concludes, maybe would be a good step to go to. Maybe Jungle Boy. Not a lot going on for Jungle Boy at the second. Could be interesting to see what he would be like against, the Jurassic Express. He could get maybe a quick win over Marco Stunt. Maybe the big matches with Luchasaurus, and maybe just this real guy taking on this comedy act. It maybe could bring out the best in both acts and show the serious side of the likes of Jungle Boy, Luchasaurus, Marco Stunt. At the same time, you're getting Eddie Kingston over at the same time. So maybe that's a good way to start it off for him. Like I say, I want to see him face some of the established names, and I want to see what he can bring to the table. I want this sort of dangerous guy, someone that people are afraid of, unsure of what he's going to do next. Maybe kind of a bit like the Murder Hawk, but of course without the need of having a manager by his side, because he can do all, He can give all the salty lines himself. He doesn't need any help in that category. I would eventually like to see him paired with Santana and Ortiz, like you suggested previously. But at the moment, the Inner Circle seems to be sticking around for the time being. I do think, though, that their time is coming up soon. I do think that there will be a point where we do see a break of the Inner Circle, and maybe at that point it would be interesting to see what Santana and Ortiz could bring to the table with Eddie Kingston as a stable, because they love their tag teams, they love their trios. I think it would be a great trio. You could keep Jericho and Hager together when the Inner Circle break up, and Sammy can go on to be, arguably a big babyface when the time is right. But again, it all matters when fans come back, and I think that's when you might see some of these angles shot and then put for the viewing public. Keeping things with a Tire World Order, and we're going to be talking Impact Wrestling for us now. Would you shorten the Wrestle House segments on Impact TV after a somewhat universal agreement that the amount of segments it took up were perhaps a bit much? Maybe do like with Gut Check and air a few minutes on TV, but put full episodes on Impact Plus app. Well, I spoke about this on This Is Wrestling This Week, which is a brand new series that we've brought to the channel in the last couple of weeks. Episode 2 is available. It was available from Friday, so great content on there. A lot of the topics that are not brought up in the Q&A today, definitely worth going and checking out. George was fantastic to come onto the show as well, so do appreciate him being there. We talked about Wrestle House, and I said how much I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I thought it was fresh. I thought it was fun. I think it's a great thing to do to take your product out from when you're watching, these empty arena shows, to go and do something completely different. Bring it to a different location. You can have matches, you can have segments, skits. Yes, ultimately, this is set really for the rivalry with Rosemary, Ty Valkyrie, and of course with Johnny Bravo in the middle. But you've got all these wacky characters in the middle as well, and they can make a lot of fun with it. Will it be like the Jersey Shore? Will it be like a Big Brother? Time will tell, and we'll have to wait and see. What I will say is, though, on the slight negative, and I will actually agree with the universal opinion, that these segments were slightly too long. I really enjoyed the first segment. I thought it was a perfect length. When it came back the second time, I do feel like, yes, it was slightly longer, or it kind of dragged slightly on the second show. Would I do it like a Gut Check? I actually felt the Gut Check ones were too short. I actually wanted to see more, which is great because that's what they wanted to do. They made you want to go on Impact Plus and check the full episodes out, and don't blame them for that. Less is more sometimes, and I think that is a great marquee within professional wrestling that is not used enough in 2020. We seem to be given everything sometimes for absolutely nothing, and sometimes it gives you somewhere where you don't know where you can go after that, and that's not really Impact Wrestling. That's every company out there today. But to give a full quote on Wrestle House for the next show, I would like to see it once, but what I would say in a pro of the length and how it was done, and why it was done like it was done, so many of the roster are not involved now on Impact TV and have been pulled. It's almost like half a roster is involved in this house, so it's a way of giving them TV time, because if you've got like 12, 14 personalities and you only give them 5 minutes, they've really got to really, nail it to get their 30 seconds done perfectly. This way, you've got 2 parts of the show where you get 5 7-minute segments with these guys, and they get a chance to have a good portion of the show, sell themselves in the best way possible, and as well, it just breaks up that show nicely. When everything's just focused on that ring, for 2 straight hours, it can get to a point where you think, well, there's no fans, it feels a bit samey, and Impact doesn't have that like other, promotions where they got fans, cheering at ringside. Impact's complete silence, just matches, and for them this is their way to have a breakaway, and sometimes it breaks up the show nicely, and perhaps if the segments are always golden, you won't notice it. So maybe that is a detriment to saying that the second segment wasn't as strong as the first segment. But I really enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing where it's going to go next. I want to see if people are going to get voted out of the house or something, ways to write people off. I think that if there is going to be some sort of winner, I want to see how that's going to be portrayed. So hopefully for me, that would be the great direction they could go with it this week. Maybe seeing someone that's voted off, or, Rosemary makes them disappear. Whatever, weird and wonderful way that they can make this work. Because for me, I think this has potential to be wrestling gold. It's wrestle crap, don't get me wrong, but it can be wrestle gold at the same time, because wrestle crap can fall in the great character category. It can also fall in the crap category. We've seen a lot of crap, definitely in our time in wrestling. But this, for me, so far, I'm very positive with it, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it will go next. Next question comes from Straight Edge Josh. What's the worst wrestling injury in your mind? I'd personally say Joey Mercury getting his face caved in with a ladder. That was nasty. Armageddon 2006, that was the four-way ladder match. Definitely was an incredible ladder match, but yeah, I mean, Joey Mercury's not one he wants to watch back, is it? Let's be fair. There are some incredible moments where we think that. I know that the Hard Hitting Wrestling Show gave their opinion as well on it, saying about Seth Rollins with his match against Kane. I believe that was on the European tour back in 2015 when he done a lot of damage to his knee. I think his MCL and ACL were both done at the same time. That ruled him out for, I think, around about 8 months at the time. I noticed in the comments as well that there was a comment about Owen Hart as well, which, it more falls under tragedy rather injury. But, of course, that would be, if we were going with the tragedies, that would be up there. From an injury side of things, I have to go with WCW's pay-per-view from Sin in 2001, and it's one Sid Vicious. Now, he was on the top rope. I believe he was going to jump off the top rope, and as he went to just land on the canvas, just standing vertically, his leg actually snaps the wrong way. It is graphic, it is brutal, it is nasty, it is hard to watch. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's something to check out on the WWE Network if it's something you haven't seen, because it is truly an experience and unreal. But I don't recommend having your dinner around the same time. It's really brutal, and yeah, was a horrifying view. So for me, for your answer today, I will give Sid Vicious 2001, and yeah, it was painful. Speaking of the hard-hitting wrestling show, they're here with our next question. Which direction will WWE writers take on Alexa Bliss's storyline? Very interesting indeed. In fact, it kind of refers to which storyline you mean, because there's two big ones there with SmackDown Live. We will touch on the Bray Wyatt one very, very shortly. But Nikki Cross was a very key one there, because at the end, she was so distraught once again that she pushed Alexa Bliss, and it does push more towards a tease of a breakup between the two. The difference between last week's episode of me talking about this on here on SCW to this week, it would appear that Nikki Cross would be the more likely of those two to turn heel, as the fact that she was the one that turned on Alexa Bliss. But of course, let's have Alexa Bliss on her own, and then of course we had the moment where she was attacked by the Fiend. Now, for me, I did put a poll on Twitter with this one, and it got a resounding over 80% were in favour of really liking this storyline. I must admit, sometimes I have a bit of a disconnect with this sort of stuff, because I'm not a fan of like the intergender stuff, really. I don't really like seeing, the guys, violent with the women and with the mandible claw. It's a family-friendly product. I don't think that's always the message you should necessarily be putting out there. But then, obviously it's in other things like criminal dramas, stuff like that. You do see this stuff regularly on TV. We are watching characters, and it's not what's really happening. So, but from a storyline perspective, it makes perfect sense, and I think it was a decent, shocking cliffhanger from that. Looking at that, because we see Bray Wyatt, of course, there attacking Alexa Bliss. And Alexa Bliss was seen as like the affection of Braun's eye from Mixed Match Challenge many years ago, which didn't really get many viewers, but we seem to have, turned it up a gear. We first brought it in for people to remind them if they didn't know before at Extreme Rules, where we had her sort of teased as a Sister Abigail character. Now we've seen the attack here on Alexa Bliss with the mandible claw this week. You assume that it's going to bring Braun Strowman back so the Fiend can get what he wants, which is a championship match at SummerSlam. Will this lead to Alexa Bliss, though, turning heel on Braun Strowman? That's somewhere down the line. Maybe both Nikki and Alexa turn heel. Maybe it's the fact that Nikki stays face and Alexa turns heel. There's so many different variables of what it could be. Maybe Alexa Bliss just keeps well away from everything going forward, doesn't want to be seen near Braun Strowman, doesn't feel protected anymore. Of course, the monster among men that he is should be quite protective, you would think, but it's not the case entirely. So, I mean, there's many different directions of where it can and will go. I think the most likely is that, of course, this sets up the match for SummerSlam. What it does for Alexa Bliss, I'm not so sure. I'm not really sure if we're going to get much more of a payoff from it. I think that was just the big angle to set up the match. It would be interesting if she turned heel against Braun Strowman. A lot of people want to see it as that Sister Abigail character. A lot of people want to see her as part of the Firefly Funhouse angle and setup going forward. And I've wanted Sister Abigail for many years. So maybe WWE is listening to their fans. You never know. I personally, I'm not a fan of it. I don't want to see Alexa Bliss as Sister Abigail. For me, she doesn't fit the bill. And I think she's a star on her own and wouldn't necessarily need it. Would it freshen up a gimmick a little bit after a few years? Arguably, yes. But I think Nikki Cross would be probably better suited for that role if one of the two superstars were ever to be mentioned. But it's certainly a lot to digest. It's certainly intriguing for next week, because certainly it's a big talking point. We don't know what's going to happen. So, yeah, we'll have to tune in next week to find out. And I think that's the name of the game. We can't a cliffhanger, and we don't get enough of those these days in WWE. Next question coming from Austin Whitley for us now. In 2017, I thought Braun Strowman was going to be the man. Do you think he ever will have that popularity again? Really good question, this one. Now, do I give you the short answer or do I give you the long answer? I know you want the long answer, so here we go. Let's take a trip down memory lane, shall we? 2017, like you said, Braun Strowman, he was built as the monster among men, and people were going to get these hands. He was flipping over trucks. He was making sure, that people were not getting out of his grasp. He was literally dominant. He was a heel as well at this point, and he got given that match against Brock Lesnar, which was great to see at the time at No Mercy for the championship, because you kind of felt like, God, they're going with the momentum, and sometimes, a lot of times, WWE gets cold feet with these things and don't go with the momentum of a superstar when they're really over the crowd. But this was the first of many times that Braun Strowman would suffer a bit of failure in WWE. He kind of lost that match. We fast forward, Nicholas at WrestleMania 34, that was the time. If there was ever a time for Braun Strowman where he should have won the championship, he was most over at that point. He should have won the Royal Rumble. We got Shinsuke and AJ, so I'm not going to complain so much, but they built Roman Reigns for that role against Brock Lesnar instead. Wasn't the right move, in my personal opinion. I would have preferred to have seen Braun Strowman or a triple threat match for WrestleMania, but instead, we got that awful tag team match instead. After that, the greatest Royal Rumble win, and he won Money in the Bank. You thought he had to have the championship when he did that. We got a piss poor storytelling there with Roman Reigns there. It wasn't going to happen where he was going to win the championship, and we had this awful stable we was put in as well when he turned heel, and everything just fell flat. And for the last sort of year to 18 months, everything just felt really weird and flat with Braun Strowman, and I just can't understand why they got it so wrong. And here we go. As I've said in the previous weeks, I'm going to do it again this week. I want my monster back. This guy was so good as a heel, and he needs that heel turn desperately. He's now the guy who gets put pranks on by Miz and Morrison. It's not a good look for your monster, and he became champion because of the fact that he was Intercontinental Champion, lost a 3-on-1 handicap match, wasn't built for the role because Roman Reigns wasn't going to be there on a pandemic. That's why Braun Strowman was given this opportunity. He walked into a championship match, arguably undeserved, and at the coolest point of his entire run in WWE, and he's had, crap storyline after crap storyline since. Now, his build up until Extreme Rules for me was decent. I hated the Swamp Fight. I have to be honest with it, it wasn't for me. We haven't seen Braun since, and I think the championship is going to The Fiend at SummerSlam. Will they have another match after that at Payback? Well, Payback seems a suitable name, doesn't it, for another rematch? We'll have to wait and see. But I think that hopefully this will give some sort of change to Braun Strowman. He needs something, like you said, to get that popularity again. He needs to become the monster among men once again. He needs to be a heel. And for me, really, we need a darker side, and I think he'd be more suited on Raw. I know we shouldn't just change wrestlers willy-nilly here and there, but I think Braun Strowman would be great being a heel against Drew McIntyre, or being, in the mix there with those likes of, Aleister Black and, other superstars that they've got there on Monday nights. I think he'd be more suited with that roster than he has with SmackDown. Who has he got to face after The Fiend? A lot of the guys are half of his size that he should be destroying. I just don't think that that's a good match. It's not going to fit for me, so I'm a bit worried where we go next with the Monster Among Men. Mike, Italian Habs Mike, with our next question for us now here on AskSCW. With Sasha and Bayley having all the titles, has severely damaged the women's division and making it unwatchable. What does WWE need to do to fix the women's division for Raw and SmackDown? To me, they need to get the titles off both of them soon to make it interesting again. Well, weirdly enough, a lot of people seem to be quite popular, seem to be liking what they're doing with this storyline. I wonder how they feel now where it's gone, damaging with Asuka, because that, I think, is where really it does turn a little bit. I think the initial thing that you need to do with these women is to get the tag team belts off of them. They're no longer double champions. It can help the undercard of both of those shows, because then they have belts to go for in the meantime. I'm perfectly okay with Sasha and Bayley and Asuka having the top of the division right now, because they are probably the most established names. And if you want to get the ratings in, I kind of get why WWE is doing the direction they're going. But at the same time, like you say there, if they've got all the gold, they've been on all the shows. They're on every single show. Everyone had a dig at Charlotte Flair when she was doing it. Now, I understand she was NXT Women's Champion at the time, and we thought we were going to get something that we didn't get in the end, which means, well, kind of a lot of the criticism was kind of, was worthy in the end. Let's be honest. It was me that was probably in the minority, and I was actually wrong. I'm going to be honest with you. But at the same time, you look now and say, it's exactly the same with Bayley and Sasha Banks as well. Sasha, though, has really elevated herself. She was kind of felt like an afterthought, a Bayley's shadow. at one point. She is not that anymore. She is up at the top of the card where she belongs, in my personal opinion. She needs to be in that established area of the card. I still want to see the Bayley and Sasha feud at some point down the line. Not sure quite when we're going to get it. Another storyline I think that has been delayed due to the fact with the pandemic right now. Don't think we're going to get it at SummerSlam. I think the tag team belts is the best way to go. Bayley and Sasha can continue on for the meantime, and we can build up creditable champions in the meantime. The problem for Bayley is she's run out of people to face apart from Sasha Banks. The timing was supposed to be now. So maybe we need an NXT call-up. Maybe we need someone to come in there and really give Bayley a good 2 to 3 month feud to freshen things up a little bit. Or we need to have a face or a heel turn somewhere along the line to freshen things up as well. Naomi could be a good shout because this Naomi deserves better hashtag. That could be a program that they could maybe work for another month or two if they need to give Bayley a competitor. At the moment, the Asuka feud is not finished with Sasha Banks. I do think Asuka will eventually get the Raw Women's Championship back, but we'll have to wait and see how that storyline will play out down the line. But it's interesting. I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do to make the women's division interesting again? And I mean, the big question, which will be coming up in the next lot, is what are the Boss and Hug Connection going to do next? Because they've got all the gold. Will they go for the last title? And that question was greatly asked by Noob and Co, which is the fourth question on this lineup, which I'll ask first. Are Sasha and Bayley going after the NXT Women's Championship next? But also asks is, what are your thoughts on Asuka losing the Raw Women's title, and what's her next move? Who will face Bayley for the SmackDown Women's title? And what's Bray Wyatt's next move after kidnapping Alexa Bliss? Well, we sort of touched on a few bits already on these questions there, but I mean, Asuka, that feud is not finished. A lot of people were unhappy with the way it was done on Raw. I do think Kairi Sane was just kind of beaten up, really, wasn't she, to be written off TV? I suppose they could have done something just to really make it clear that you have that dilemma. But I liked the dilemma that Asuka had. Was it going to be, save your friend or have the championship? I like the way that it was done. For me, it was creative, and it builds the story on further to SummerSlam. We can't, it's good to have decisive wins and stuff like that. And I think when you've had a botched finish once, you want it the second time round, but this really did set up for SummerSlam. I think it's good, and I quite liked it, so I think that Asuka continues, and I think she will win the title back. I don't think Sasha is permanently on Monday nights, so for me, this is just a short-term solution, in my opinion, at the moment. But, I mean, I was wrong. I thought Asuka was always going to retain. Rumour mill said she was going to retain, but it didn't happen in the end, so we'll have to wait and see what is going to happen next with her. As for Bayley, I suggested Naomi could be the next person that could be in the mix there. Maybe it could be a multi-woman match. Nikki Cross doesn't seem like she's going to give up. I originally thought, before Alexa Bliss was attacked on SmackDown, I thought we were getting a triple threat match of Bayley, Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss at SummerSlam. Maybe that's not going to be the case now. So, I mean, Lacey Evans is in the mix there. Maybe we've put all the women in the match there together. Who knows? But Bayley, she's running out of opponents, so we need to keep it fresh in some way. But it's been a while since she's faced Bliss. So, I mean, if Bliss was to stay face, I would be in favour most if we had a singles match to that, but I'm sure a lot of fans would love to see it to be Bayley versus Naomi. But we'll have to wait and see what will happen with that. Also in there, what happens with Alexa Bliss there? Well, as we mentioned earlier in the video, lots of different potential things that could happen. I wanted to at least say she's okay next week and that it's tough. She doesn't want to be anywhere near the Fiend anymore, frightened for her life. But, that she'll be okay and she'll get over it. You don't want it like how Seth Rollins was last year, where he was absolutely screaming and petrified of the Fiend, completely killed everything that was good about Seth Rollins at the time, and forced him to go heel, which may be a blessing in disguise. We got that Messiah gimmick, but I rest my case with that. Will we get Alexa Bliss turning heel at some way further down the line, and the line with Bray Wyatt against Braun Strowman? Time will tell with that one. I'm not so convinced at this stage at the moment, so we'll have to wait and see. But as for the NXT Women's Championship, I mean, that's what Bayley and Sasha have left to do, so I wouldn't be surprised if they went for it. They can go on the show that they've got the Tag Team Championships. It wouldn't be out of realm for them to do so. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. I mean, Io Shirai and Asuka could go for the Women's Championships. That's a way to get the belts off of, the Boss and Hug Connection. And then that way, for the time being, yes, Asuka isn't the Raw Women's Champion, but she's still in the championship picture with her tag belts. It would be Io Shirai that would be. But then, could be teased on Raw and SmackDown with appearances, and you would know in the coming months whether she was ready for the jump to Raw and SmackDown when she drops the championship, which probably I don't think is the worst thing to do with those tag team championships, really. I'd like to see an NXT tag team win it next, because it's a great way to give them some exposure, builds more depth in the women's tag team division. I think it would be a good move, personally. So, yeah. We'll have to wait and see. Time will tell. I'm sure it's going to be bonkers, whatever they decide to do next with the women's division. They've definitely put all their eggs in one basket. But I'm interested to see what the next steps are at this particular moment. Next question coming from Dylan Ketchum for us now. What's next for Shorty G after his heel turn? Hashtag SmackDown. I really enjoyed it. I love the fact that he was brainwashed by Baron Corbin and went after Matt Riddle to try and get the King's ransom. I'm hoping that we're going to get an evolution and we're going to go back to Chad Gable. No more Shorty G. The guy hasn't dressed like Shorty G since his comeback at least. And with a heel turn as well, I mean, it's a bit more interesting. He's worked as a heel before. To mixed success when he was with Shelton Benjamin, but I think it just gives a new layer of the character, and rather than being the person that's bullied and stuff, he can become the bully or partnering up with the bully, and it gives a bit more of an interesting dynamic for him. I just feel for me a little bit that Shorty G was a horrible gimmick. I understand they wanted to do something to give him TV time, but for me it was just something I was never a fan of. So if you're going to ask me, I love to see that he'll turn go full-fledged, full-on Chad Gable, and him to be almost like Kurt Angle back in the day, where he knows he's a great wrestler. He's cocky about it. Maybe picks on people his own size. You looked at the match he had the other week with Drew Gulak, Lince Dorado, Grand Metalik. Why was he called Shorty G? He's the same height as all of them. So I think there is something that they can go with this, and it could be interesting going forward. I'm not entirely sure what the right move is, but I've definitely, apart from knowing that he needs to turn heel and he needs to be Chad Gable again. That's what's the must. And if we get that, I'll be happy. Will we get a match with him and Riddle? I'd love to see that. I think it'd be quite a cool match. Gable was fantastic in the ring. Riddle, he's got some great matches as well. So yeah, I think that would be dynamite, really, at some point, maybe on SmackDown. Maybe that could come this next coming week. We'll have to wait and see. Next question comes from Orange Cassidy's Thumb. I'm going to give a thumbs up for this one. What would be the next best landing spot for Kairi Sane, in your opinion? Well, she left on good graces with WWE, so, I mean, if she was going to work in America again, I think it would be with WWE. I don't expect her to do AEW or Impact Wrestling or any of those companies. She wants to go back to Japan, so I expect if she's going to wrestle anywhere, Stardom is the place. I believe she's wrestled there before. She can have some great matches. She's amongst, in Japan, where she's from. She can speak her language, get some killer promos, have some killer matches. And if she ever fancies to come back to the States, I mean, she beat Bayley on the way out, so that would suggest really that she's in WWE's good books here. They didn't really want to let her go, and probably would be happy to have her stay or come back at some stage. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to come of it. But personally, for me, I wouldn't be surprised if she was back in WWE one day. But as for the next destination right now, Stardom I expect to be her home. Next question comes from Jacob Grundy. Who do you think will win the New Japan Cup USA? Well, I must admit, I'm a casual New Japan follower, so I'm not fully up to date with everything going on, but I am aware that Evil left LIJ and has now become a part of the Bullet Club and become the leader and become the champion as well. So it would be interesting to see what's going to happen with that cup. Now, I'm not entirely sure of all the participants that are involved, but I know that a lot of superstars that are international have not come in during the pandemic. So for me, I think the best route to go would be to use someone from LIJ, because I think that's the natural feud. So whether it be Naito, I think Sonata would be a great shout for him to have that opportunity to go for the championship as well on a minor sort of area. If he gets into the championship picture, you get him in there, and then you can save Naito for like Wrestle Kingdom, for example. I also would like to see Hiro Takahashi. I think that he would be a great candidate. It would be nice to see him in that role in the main event, or have that opportunity to have that big trophy as well. But if I had to pick one right now, I'm going to go Sonata, just because Evil, Sonata, former tag team. Sonata is a great single star as well. I think he's believable as the guy. He's been in championship matches before, and we could see save Naito for a later date. So if it was me, I'm going to put my money right now on Sonata. Last question this week comes from Kevin. If Mabel was the third man in the NWO, how would you have booked the following 6 months of WCW? Right, to put this nicely, you don't. I'm not to be horrible, but this would have killed the NWO immediately. Hollywood Hogan was perfect for the role because he'd been with Vince McMahon for all them years, and he was the biggest star in wrestling and was turned on by the fans of WCW. Had two former WWE guys come into the company in Hall and Nash. It just made perfect sense of that storyline. If it had been Sting, like it had been rumoured before Hogan, Sting would have been great as well, because he was the WCW guy, and he would have turned on his company, and instead of turning on Vince, it's like, well, let's take over WCW and make this a better place than what it was, and all the pitfalls of what WCW had been falling through in the previous year. So I think that would have been kind of cool. Mabel, I'd have brought in Mo, I would say. We had 100 members of the NWO, so Mo might as well have come in. Yeah, he was a former WWE guy, but I just don't think it would have been a natural good fit for him. I really don't. I think that basically Hogan obviously then would have come back as a babyface at some point. I think that the NWO gimmick would have been finished within 6 months with Hogan and Sting taking them out. It just would felt very much like the Butcher when we had the Three Faces of Fear in '94. Never someone that's going to be full credibility against the baby faces. And yeah, I just wouldn't have seen it. If Mabel had come to WCW, I do think there would have been one stable that would have been fitting, and it would not have been a main event stable. Actually would have been the Dungeon of Doom. I think that would have been a nice fitting place for him. Of course, we later got his Viscera character when he was part of the ministry and the corporate ministry in WWE later at times. But yeah, if he'd have been part of the Dungeon of Doom, he could have had Kevin Sullivan at the Realm in that big dungeon as well, where it was a bit sort of spooky and weird as well at the time. So I think that could have worked quite well. But yeah, not for me, unfortunately, with Mabel as part of the NWO, unfortunately. But that's all from this week anyway, here on AskSCW. I'm going to get inside because the sun is going in. But yeah, please like, share, subscribe, share with a friend. Thank you for watching as always. I'll see you next time here on AskSCW. Take care.